The first example that we're going to consider in our series on courage is Abram. He displayed great courage when God called him to leave home and go to an unknown land which the Lord would show to him. We read in Genesis 12 verses 1 through 5, "Now the Lord said to Abram, Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. Friends, God is not going to speak to us today and tell us to leave our home like He did with Abram. But there are lessons about acting with courage that can be learned from Abram's example. Courage is faithfulness in the midst of trials and tribulations. In the example of Abram, we see one who sacrificed what was comfortable and familiar for hardship and uncertainty. Abram left Ur with his wife, father, nephew, and settled in Haran. The text says they went out together from Ur the Chaldees in order to enter the land of Canaan, Genesis 11 and verse 31. Yet the inspired record indicates that they stopped and they settled in Haran. Terah, Abraham's father, would later die in Haran before any of his family ever reached the land of Canaan. After the death of his father, God called Abram to leave Haran. But what was he to leave? God said, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house." He was called to go to a land which God would show him, and the Lord assured Abram that he would be blessed. When God called, Abram obeyed. He left with his wife, with his nephew Lot, and with all of their possessions. This occurred when Abram was already 75 years old. And as we will see later in this lesson, his age was significant. But why did this take courage? The scriptures provide a few reasons why it took courage for Abram to leave his home and follow where the Lord would lead. First, it took courage because he did not know where he was going. The text states that Abram and his family left Ur in order to enter the land of Canaan. But there's no indication that Abram had any familiarity whatsoever with the land when God called him. As a matter of history, we know that Abram was going to the land of Canaan, but Abram left Haran not knowing where he was going, according to Hebrews 11 and verse 8. Familiarity with an area would allow one to plan the best route and prepare for specific challenges that he would face along the way. But Abram did not have this luxury. Instead, he simply put his faith in God and followed the Lord. Second, it took courage because he had to leave his father and his relatives. This was the time of the patriarchs, and one's identity was tied to their family. While he was alive, the patriarchs was the head, or the patriarch of the family was the head of the generations that followed. Abraham was told to leave his relatives, to leave his father's house. He was separating himself from his kinsmen during a time when one had to rely on these people for support, for protection, and for companionship. Furthermore, Abram did this when he was 75 years old. Hardly a young man eager to move out on his own, he had ties to his family that were firmly established over the course of decades. But he left his family so that he might become the friend of God, James 2 and verse 23. And then lastly, number 3, it took courage because he had to leave the home he had established for himself in Haran. Again, Abram was 75 years old when God called to him. Yes, people generally lived longer then, but he was still not far from old age. This description was used when Abram was 100 years old in Genesis 21 and verse 5. He left with no guarantee that he would ever get settled again, but he was seeking after God's reward. The Hebrew writer put it best when he said, by faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land dwelling in tents, for he was looking for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Hebrews 11, verses 9 and 10. Friends, we see that Abram was willing to leave what was comfortable and familiar in order to follow the Lord. And we too must be willing to sacrifice anything, even if it means our own lives, so that we might please the Lord. No, it will not be easy, but we must take courage and do it. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.